Hey folks, this is Tom Amoroso. I think we are good to go. Hopefully y'all can hear me okay. I just kind of want to make sure our live feed is showing a video. I am trying to track that as well in the background, so bear with me. But I think we are good. Yes, cool, awesome. All right, hi everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. I'm Tom Amoroso again. I'm sitting here in one of my gear rooms at Columbus Saber Academy. And honestly, I'm super honored to be with everyone here this week, present some amazing content, all leading up to Virtual CombatCon this coming weekend. So this would have been, I guess it still is, right, my third CombatCon experience. And I'm pretty bummed out, and a bunch of it pretty bummed out for not being in Vegas this year. And I know everybody kind of feels the same way. I'm really super excited that we were able to do this and have this coming weekend. I really want to say thank you to all the CombatCon officers and the team that's going to be presenting not only tonight, but throughout the entire week for some amazing content that you're going to see. Everybody here is incredibly talented. Hopefully, you know most of the people. If not, there should be some new faces and some new names, and we can help bring this community together a little bit closer, even though we're all kind of separated and quarantining ourselves in our various locations. Thank you all for attending, whether you're watching this live or going to watch this recorded, and we are going to save this to the Facebook platform so every days can be viewed. Make sure you take a look in the in the title list for the link for the full schedule for the week, and then the process to register for this weekend's content as well. It's all up on the CombatCon website, and again, the link is here in the post. So with that, let's get things rolling for the night. Tonight, kicking off the week, we're going to have Adam Simmons, and Adam's out there with us, and he'll video will be popping up in a second here, talking about his journey as a fighter and his CombatCon experiences. We're going to have an interview. We're going to show an interview from CombatCon 2016 with Maestro Ramon Martinez and Maestro Jeanette Acosta Martinez. That's a great perspective on the CombatCon experience and fencing and all the different disciplines that are offered. TL Smith and Ginny Coach are going to be talking with us about storycraft later tonight and integrating violence into your character. And then we're lucky enough, and we're going to be doing interviews with all the CombatCon officer team throughout the entire week. And tonight we're going to have a fun conversation and discussion with Jared Kirby and Tim Rizicki. And then we'll stay with Tim and close the night off with an intro to knife fighting content. So this is our first night. We'll be here all week with new content every night, but and please post all and any questions you might have in the Facebook page. I'm going to try to answer them as we go through, and our content presenters are going to try to be answering as it goes through as well. But if we can't get to it, we'll get to it after the call. And I always have to say this, nothing is perfect. We are going to have some difficulties, some technical difficulties as we go through tonight and the future nights this week. So bear with us. This is a real cool community. We all know that. So, you know, things happen, mistakes happen, accidents happen, and technical errors certainly will occur. So bear with us. We will make sure that all the videos presented tonight, and some of the content creators have pre-recorded their videos for us. They couldn't be with us in the evenings, but we'll make sure all of that content is up on the YouTube channel for CombatCon as well. So you can look at it and download it there. All right. One thing I'll quick note is everybody has a bio for who's talking. I haven't actually told them, but I may be chopping up a little bit of their bios, so it's easier to kind of talk through and go through. You're welcome to ask them and reach out to them for any additional questions they might have. With that, let me get Adam back going here. Hey, Adam, thanks for joining. And let me start your video here and get your unmuted as well. There you go. Thanks, man.
Can you hear me well, Tom?
You are still on mute because I couldn't hear you just then.
Testing. Can you hear me?
Wait, there you go. That's better. Sorry, I was muted on my side as well. So good. Double mute there.
All right. I'm going to go with this headset because it's a little more reliable.
Cool. So let me introduce you. Adam's over 15 years experience. Adam's currently an instructor with the Phoenix Society for Historical Swordsmanship with specializations in military saber, rapier, longsword, sword and buckler. And Adam will be talking with us tonight about his journey as a fighter and his time in the CombatCon and having CombatCon as kind of a background to that experience and process. I'm going to be running a presentation in the background for us here for Adam to talk through, and then we'll pop some videos up as we go. So with that, Adam, thank you for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Tom.
Let me get the screen share going for us here.
Absolutely. As he's doing that, to recap what I'm going to tell you today, I'm going to share some of my experiences, as well as we go through my different stages that I've experienced. I'd like to share some tips and maybe even tricks when I come to tournaments or tactics that I use personally in fighting various types of different opponents. And we'll get to that more towards the end, but we should save some time as well for questions and answers. So feel free to add those, but I won't be addressing them until the end. So just be aware of that.
All right, looks like we're good to go.
Next slide.
Yep.
As you can see here, I started with swords a long time ago. This is me either in high school or shortly thereafter in the 90s. My brothers and I, we liked sword fighting, movies, action, history, all of the above. And we ended up creating our own foam boffers, very similar to what you might see in LARPs or other combat role-playing games, although we weren't really familiar with that. We just wanted to battle. So we created a massive pile of different weapons that we would then get the various neighbors to come, and we would have pretty good sized battles there in Page, Arizona. Although we weren't well trained, we didn't have classical training at the time, I think that a lot of those early sparring instincts were developed during that time frame. Even battlefield awareness, ability to dodge, parry, footwork. Although I might have picked up some bad habits, like I said, I think more good habits actually came from that than not. When I did actually start getting more formal training was when I went back to school for my MBA. I went to Flagstaff, Northern Arizona University. I was lucky enough to study for a year with William Wilson, who I believe is still teaching fencing there, although he might be somewhat retired from the HEMA side of things. He's a well-known translator of Capoferro, Marazzo, other early manuscripts, and innovator in the HEMA community. There I learned primarily classical saber, Italian saber, that he was very familiar with. I also got introduced to rapier and some other disciplines in brief that he would show us. That led me to my association with the Society for Creative Anachronism, or SCA. I started attending that more seriously once I moved down here to Phoenix, Arizona in the 2006 timeframe, and I have been off and on with them since then. Mostly I do the rapier fencing with the SCA, although they have kind of a limited rule set for heavy rapier. It's still a pretty good simulation, at least of the duel. They also have melees, which again kind of help with battlefield awareness. They have a cut and thrust type of fighting as well, which is HEMA-like and has become more HEMA influenced over time. For instance, in the last 10 years, we've been doing longsword and other weapons as well as the more traditional cut and thrust weapons like rapier or saber. That led me to the Fiore Longsword Study Group, which was a smaller group offside the SCA, where we were studying Fiore, Marazzo, some other things, but it really got me interested in Fiore Longsword, and I had a good basis for my longsword from that study group. Go ahead. I have some tips here for beginners, and this could be for any system. It wouldn't have to be for sword fighting necessarily. The first thing I would say is that if you're really beginning, choose one system or style and stick with it for at least a year to try to get a foundation in something, especially if you're brand new to martial arts. Even if it's not what you end up using in the end, at least you'll get a foundation in footwork, in movement, etc. So I would recommend focus at first and branch out later. Also, this is as a person who comes with experience into a martial art, you have to put on your student cap, as they say, or present your empty cup. And what I mean by that is, if I'm taking a lesson from somebody, I want to give them the respect of paying attention to what they're saying and trying to apply it without trying to question a lot or put a lot of baggage there. So as an experienced martial artist, this is really more difficult than a brand new person, but it's something we can all practice when we're trying to learn from somebody else. After that, after you've gone through the lesson, that's a good time to analyze and think and maybe approach the instructor and say, hey, I thought about this and that. What about this and this? That's the best time to do that, is give it a little time, try to absorb what they're saying, and then go back for some questions. At larger events, such as CombatCon or other, such as SoCal Sword Fight, or if you're going to some of the East Coast events, I would say don't try to do too much at first. Try to pace yourself. Also, you might try to go out of your comfort zone. If you've already been focusing on, say, longsword or rapier, and you've only been doing that, try to take some other classes as well. Maybe there's something that you have never seen, like Spanish rapier, or in CombatCon, we might have I don't know, boarding actions or something with pirates in it, or gladiators. Take some of those classes and branch out a little bit. Also, don't let a lack of funds or gear stop you. As you can tell, I started with not all of the toys I have today. You don't need a lot. You could just practice with a stick and go through your basic cuts, or without a stick. And rule number one, as you might know from Zombieland, is cardio. A lot of new fighters become surprised when they're in sparring and they gas out. It's mostly a cardio issue, but it's also an adrenaline rush issue. People don't understand that you trigger a fight or flight response when you're sparring, and that will improve over time. But the other thing that will help you improve is cardio. Okay, next, please. The next stage, and this is kind of a fuzzy one, is tournament contender and assistant instructor. So as you become a more advanced student, you start going into tournaments, you start competing more, and this is the stage I was in here, where I was more experienced. I was a little bit bored with just doing SCA rapier, and I wanted to branch out. So I looked for some other opportunities. I was introduced to ISMAC, which was a predecessor to CombatCon. I think Jared and Tim and others were already organizing that event, or were associated with it. And I went to several of those. They were a little bit far for me, so I was only able to go maybe every other year in that time frame. This is like the early, maybe it's 2006 through 2009 is when that was held. But I became more aware of the larger Western martial arts community through that event. I did find another group to study with, La Fratellanza del Spada. I might have it slightly spelled wrong. I think it's supposed to be in Italian rather than Spanish. But that was a study group that was meeting at a YMCA and then later at a park. You can see a picture here. This is not only the Fratellanza folks, but also some of the Phoenix Society folks who were co-meeting. They would have Fratellanza and the Phoenix Society folks here. And the Fratellanza folks were doing more lesson-based, and the Phoenix Society folks at the time were just sparring. So I would bounce between the two. Anyway, we also ended up having some kind of combined meetings and events. You can see here Sean Clark, who was one of the primary instructors, as well as Jim Barrows. You can see Richard Marston from Phoenix Society, founder there, and Kyle Griswold, who's now with Mordhau, is in the background, and John Patterson is in the next to me. You can see me in the red sleeves. As you can tell, this was a little bit earlier. We're all using nylon and more basic things, but it was a fun time. I eventually ended up joining the Phoenix Society more regularly, and I ended up with them and still am from this time. During the same time, I started attending CombatCon and later SoCal Sword Fight every year. Those are my two favorite events I try to make. Obviously, this year we're more remote, which on the one hand is sad, but it also allows us this opportunity to learn from more people. Go ahead. Let's talk about tournaments. The good, the bad, and the ugly. The good, I think tournaments are an excellent opportunity to stress test your skills, right? I mean, you spar with your people in your tournament, in your club, but when you go to an event, the pressure is on, you're fencing new people, you've got to focus, and the adrenaline is definitely higher. So I think it's a good opportunity for those reasons. And if you are doing something wrong, you realize it quite quickly. in that you're going to get hit. It's not going to work as well as you thought, and you're going to have things to work on. You can see here, I'm in the black. My friend Jim is, or James is being hit by an Unterhau, a rising cut, which I'm a little bit infamous for because I'm shorter and I know how to do those safely, which I can talk about later, how to do low blows against people in safety. But the other good things about tournaments, it's a great opportunity to fence folks who you're not familiar with, to travel, to go to new places. I've been to Mexico City, I've been to Calgary, Canada, I've been all over the Western US to go to different tournaments. I would like to go to Europe or in the East Coast more, but perhaps after all this pandemic is done, we can return to that. Some of the bad. Tournament judging can be very, very spotty. I mean, all over the map, right? When the judges are good and the ring boss knows what they're doing and is listening to their judges and also applying a little bit of judgment themselves, it can go very smoothly. Also, if both competitors are going to self-call to a certain extent, I don't always self-call right away. If something was confusing, I wait for the judges to figure it out. And if they're not saying what happened to me, then I'll self-call saying, no, I was hit. I don't accept my point. It was bad. Please give it to him, or something along those lines. Again, it doesn't always happen, and both people kind of have to be doing it for it to be fair, and not everybody's going to self-call. So that's part of the bad. On the other hand, if you're not going to do electric scoring, I don't know what else to do other than train your judges. And that means that people are going to have to spend time judging, which is tiring and a pain. But I would encourage every good competitor to spend some time judging so they can get a feel for themselves, because you're going to accept that bad calls happen more when you make some bad calls yourself. And if you're judging, don't be afraid to put your flags as an X and say, hey, I don't know what I saw. I'm not confident enough to make that call. Don't feel pressured to make a call if you're not sure. Some of the other bad or ugly things that happen, I see people really beat themselves up about what happens in a tournament. They say things on Facebook or in person, and it can depress them because they have built up this how good they think they are maybe in their minds against their friends, but they go to a tournament and they don't do as well as they think they should, or about a bad call or their performance or whatever. I feel like people put too much on that. At the end of the day, it should be for fun. If you're not having fun, don't do it. If you're really beating yourself up about it, I would say take some time, take a break, and then come back when you're ready. I could go on about some other ugly things. Tournaments that have not been perhaps ran as fairly as they should. I'm not going to go into specifics. I think the general rule, you should avoid the appearance of conflicts of interest. Does that make sense? I'm not going to go into details, but try to diversify your staff. If you're running a tournament, maybe you shouldn't be, if you're like the main person of a club that's running a tournament, maybe you shouldn't be competing in that tournament. You know what I mean? That's just to avoid the conflicts of interest. Okay, I think that's good for now. Some other tips for new instructors and advanced students. I would say branch out and diversify your skill set. I try to learn new systems frequently. I've kind of narrowed down what I'm studying now, but at the time I was trying to pick up skill sets of just about anything because I felt like I could add to my toolbox by learning new things, especially again, after you've got your foundation, then branch out. Secondarily, read the sources for yourself. Don't just trust at this stage what your instructor is saying. Start to read this in sources and see what you think yourself, because going back to those sources, Fiore, Italian rapier, I have my own way of seeing and reading those things now, applying my filter to them that may be different than what I was taught originally. So try to read it yourself and you'll come out with things that you can apply yourself and pass on. Also, I would encourage you to teach what interests you, even if you don't feel confident that you're the best instructor in the world. try to do some teaching, maybe with some coaching from your head instructor. Try to lead a beginner class to start. Do what you know. Start with a Fiore longsword or German longsword basics or whatever happens to be your forte. Start with that. When you're preparing for a class, especially for an event, I like to put down a lesson plan and prepare. I go back and read the sources. I put down a lesson plan of points that I'm going to hit. You don't have to hold to it really tightly, but just the act of preparing a lesson plan will help you narrow down what you want to say. Going back to tournaments for a second, fitness. I think tournaments help me in keeping me interested in fitness, in that I know if I don't train, I am going to hurt in a tournament. Yeah, I mean, I have gassed out in tournaments coming back from an injury. I was not in the kind of shape I wanted to be in a particular tournament, and I had to drop out of the tournament following that because I was so gassed out. I did not feel like I could compete to the level I wanted to. So that led me to refocusing on fitness. Also, I've had some overuse injury in my shoulders, so I have to build up my muscles to avoid injury. So focus on your fitness, use the tournaments to motivate you to do better. At events such as CombatCon, this is where it gets tough. If you're going to enter a lot of tournaments, you want to go for that tournament pass rather than the warrior pass. If you go for the warrior pass, you're not going to take full advantage of all the classes that are offered. So they've introduced what they call the tournament pass, where you get a few classes and then you focus on your tournaments, because I notice most HEMA people, they just live in the HEMA tournament area and they don't go to enough classes. Go to a few classes, but decide which one are you focusing on for that event. Are you doing tournaments or are you doing classes? And maybe trade out or try to balance that out. So I don't sign up for all the tournaments all the time. I might do 2 tournaments in an event so that I have a little time to help judge, support my teammates, socialize. Maybe I'm teaching a class or 2 myself. So try to balance your time. Don't try to do everything. Again, I would encourage you to help judge and table, if only for the experience, but also if you're not doing it, then somebody else has to. You got to take your turn. Okay, next. Over the last 5 years, I would say I've been transitioning from that more tournament-focused person into a more experienced instructor and coach. And it's not a hard transition. I wouldn't say I am the most experienced or authoritative instructor out there by any means. There are some people at CombatCon who are super experienced, such as Martinez's and others, who have that kind of master level. But I think that I'm experienced enough now, and given the number of medals that I've won, that I have some reason to offer some tips and tricks, as well as I feel that I have a fairly simple way of introducing some of these more complex specialities, such as Italian rapier. That's the one I'm most known for. I've won the most medals in, followed perhaps by sword and buckler. I also have a keen interest in military saber, and I've been teaching that more often as well. I still like longsword. Again, I don't compete in it as often, and I don't teach it as often because other people in our club are strong in that area and have won more medals, and that's their interest. Some of the people on this screen, such as Scott and Kane and Ben, they all like longsword, and they're going to do fine in teaching that. And Phil Martin there is our champion cutter. So those are some of the things I've been focused on. What I would tell to new instructors or experienced instructors is that at bigger events, you should also spend some time with your club and students. I know that Richard, for instance, is often teaching classes and has a hard time getting that in there as well. So I might spend more time helping with some of the students and cornering is what we call it, where you're in the corner of that new student and like a boxing coach, you're saying, hey, good job, try this, or focus on this. Oh, you're doing this, something, give it a little encouragement. So that's important. I would say at this point in a HEMA person's career, Tournaments are for when you feel like it. I'm getting a little older. I'm not old, but I am 42 now. We're coming up on it, and I'm not in the same place I was when I started physically. So I don't feel pressured. I try not to feel pressured to do tournaments unless I feel like it. And I think it's okay to say no thanks to a tournament or a class or something if you want to focus on one of those other areas. When I say it's okay to say no thanks, it's also might be, haven't seen a lot of this in HEMA, but there's a little bit of, what do they call it, gunslinging, where people will, because you're a known person, they might want to come fight you so they can say, I fought this person and I did better than them. Again, I haven't seen a lot of this, but if you feel like someone's doing that, I feel like it's okay as an instructor to say, hey, I'm busy right now, no thank you, and just say no thanks. It's better than getting into those kind of things. Again, sometimes you got to make them believers by doing some sparring. That's okay. Anyway, just some advice on that. At these other events, take some time outside of your club and get to know the other instructors. It's pretty easy just to stay with your club, but I like to be a little bit of a social butterfly at these events because I'm normally kind of an introvert, frankly, but I try to make the rounds and get to know the other clubs or teachers. Okay, Tom, next. I would like to show a couple of clips. Can we get a time check, Tom? How much time do we got?
We got about another 10, 15 minutes. I think we're okay.
Let's maybe show one, and then we can go to.
Good. All right, give me. Which one do you want to show first, the rapier or the sword and buckler?
Let me show sword and buckler. Although, yeah, let's show that one. I'll show you. Tell you why.
Okay, give me 1 sec, and I'll just get this loaded up for us.
This is not maybe the best fencing I've ever done, but it shows some lessons I want to show that I've learned about how to fence very tall people as a shorter fighter. And that's one of the things I'd like to talk about a bit if we have time. Go ahead.
All right, let me just check one thing real quick. Let me stop this share and just check one thing so I make sure I share it the right way for us. Hold on a sec. There we go. I knew I didn't click the right button there, so give me 1 sec and let's get
David and Goliath, right? Now remember, these are both incredibly experienced fighters. Adam may be small, but he is a absolute Tasmanian devil.
Oh yes, he is. That man has a lot of power, and he's actually not only surprisingly fast, but he's devastating.
He is.
Getting it down low. And then obviously we got Eric Hardiman with an incredible reach.
Yep.
And also a very high temperature level.
Yeah.
Judges, are you ready?
You know, Eric's my own student, and I have no idea which way this fight will go.
Yeah.
It's going to be fun.
Yes, it is.
Adam's adopting a bit more of a covered up 133 guard. Tries to roll into a thrust from it.
It looked like Eric covered and then cut.
There we go.
Torso.
He cut quite low to get there. But he got
You see, I thought Eric might actually adopt a higher Morozo stance for this. However, I think this is the smarter choice for him.
Yeah, dropping down low.
Yeah, getting to Adam's level is going to prevent Adam from running underneath him so much. Got that leg strike right in there.
Is it above or below the knees? Below?
It's pretty amazing the way that
2
Adam can
points
actually
left.
lift
2
and
points
then
left.
drop and get around Hardiman's buckler, which he was still using to try to protect that leg.
Oh. Judges.
Looks like Adam saw just a little opening to the center, put his tip there, and ran it right in.
Can you pause it there for just a second?
It's like he was trying to push in.
Go for
So
it.
just to tell what happened there a little bit, this was perhaps unwise of me because I felt like I was trying to envelop his sword or bind his sword like I would do in rapier. But in rapier, you have a longer lever and it's harder to escape. So I felt him leave, but I just went in anyway without being safe, if that makes sense. And he was able to get his point on me by backing up, which is the advantage of being tall, frankly, is he used that correctly. He stepped back and disengaged and kind of got his buckler in the way of my strike. So mine glanced off and went underneath his arm, and he stabbed me as I was coming in. I basically stabbed myself onto his sword. So that's an example of what not to do. I should have felt that, oh, he escaped. Okay, didn't work the way I wanted to. I'm going to back up and reset before pulling the trigger, as I call it, on rushing in. Okay, go ahead.
That Hardiman pressed out with his sword, and then got the thrust in.
Goal.
3 points.
Jesus. Covered. Wow.
Fence.
All
Looks
right.
like Hardman pushed his sword out of the way at the same time.
We have the worst angle.
Yeah, we do have a nice big judge.
Again, an excellent sense of distance and timing from these guys. Look at them just right there.
Just moving right in and out of measure.
Wow.
Judges.
So Hardiman wants a little leg back. He didn't cover though. He paid for
Target
it.
area.
But you can see how, he's going for the lower leg, which is the higher point value.
It's true.
1 minus 1.
Do you know why that's a higher point value?
Because according to historical, times that they would have less protection over the shin.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Goal.
So there.
Judges. Point goal to afterblow.
We had a bad view there, but we've got a pretty consistent judging spread.
1 minus 1 points goal.
1 minus 1. Goal.
Fence.
Last exchange.
Wow, that went fast.
Too fun. So this is a close match. These guys are doing a good job.
Yeah, they can still go either way with the covered thrust.
Yeah.
Point goal. Judges.
You weren't forgetting about that Tasmanian devil over there.
Just bring it in.
Just a flurry of strikes.
I saw lots of things. I saw Eric make some sort of contact. Adam made some sort of contact. Judges are going to have to sort this one out.
Yeah.
Go ahead and mute it for a second.
This is a critical call in the last exchange.
You can
I do
mute
not.
it, yeah. So what happened there, I think I parried his blow, and they call it insufficient contact basically at this point. They said that the strike to the leg was on the sword, so they call it insufficient. So it's point gold insufficient, meaning no points to him. But that means that Eric won 4-2. I think I should have maybe, again, it's a little bit questionable. I should have maybe got credit for going into the head. However, for whatever reason, I glanced off his helmet twice. On that first strike I went in, I think my sword was just a little bit off from having parried, where he moved back. I kind of glanced off his helmet, didn't make good contact, so I swung again. And I hadn't heard a hold at that point, so I just kept going. And I thought the second hit at least was a little bit more solid, and maybe I should have got credit for that. But again, I don't think the judges made a necessarily bad call. It's kind of a technicality because someone called a strike on that first contact, which again, I think I parried. What I wanted to show in that last exchange though was what I would call a safer entrance, in that I made him shoot from my, or I was guarding up here well, so all he really had on me was leg shots. So I was able to slip back and parry, but immediately after that parry, because he was overextended, I made the taller person overextend to try to reach me. I was able to rush in, and having the confidence to do that against a taller opponent, I think is what's key as a shorter fencer. You got to know when to pull the trigger, as I was saying, to rush. And some people think I'm being unsafe when I rush, and sometimes I am. You have to take chances in tournaments, frankly. But in general, the rule of thumb is control their sword or have them over miss somehow. You don't have to necessarily have a bind, but if you're feinting and they try to parry, that's another time you can go in, like I did when he tried to block with his shield. I feinted high and I just let it go down to his leg. That's another example of, I used that feint to close the distance and then I just let it go. Again, that's how I try to do low strikes. I don't do low strikes all the time because I want to save them. They're not always safe. Eric was giving me lots of low strikes. He would back up and throw to the leg, but he wasn't necessarily being safe about it. I was after blowing him every time, once in the head really well, I thought. Anyway, those are just some rules that I try to follow, is to try to be safe in entering, either bind them, feint, do a compound attack or something. In that first engagement, sometimes you just want to do a direct attack. He looked like he was open in the head, so I tried to thrust in. However, he was able to parry and hit my leg. So sometimes it doesn't work, but in tournaments, unlike free fencing or maybe a historical duel, You got to take some chances and be a little bit more aggressive, I think, than you would otherwise be, just because of the time constraints, right? If you're not being aggressive sometimes, then especially against a taller fighter, they're just going to be on the offense and you won't have anything to give back. So even when I'm being defensive, I am just waiting for a good opportunity to do an attack. Does that make sense?
Perfect. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Do you want to go through the rapier video? We got a few minutes if you want to, or anything.
Do we have
else
any
you want to
questions?
cover? Nothing has come through yet, and I've been watching as we've been going, so we're okay so far.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we had time for questions. Let's watch the rapier video and then.
Cool. Let me
Go
get
from
that up for us. Oh, let me make sure that, again, we share this right. First night, all those jitters. I want to make sure we get everything as good as we can.
Absolutely.
All right. Ready to go? Let's get rolling.
This is 2018. Go ahead and turn on the volume if you like.
Kind of short stature, but he will get up in your grill and he will not be afraid to do that, even as against someone as tall as me.
I think that's Eric talking.
So Leg's looking for the low. You can get low because of the size. Yeah. Both fencers.
I'm in black, obviously.
Jesse potentially setting up for some sort of beat, gets the thrust.
Watch the slow-mo. Okay, pause right there.
No, no.
So you might have seen what happened here is I baited, or he took a shot inside, and I was able with my dagger, which is one of my favorite parries, frankly, is I was going, let me show with the dagger. If you can kind of trade places with your sword and dagger, the dagger goes across and sets off while you're thrusting, and it's really hard to parry when you do it right. Okay, go ahead. Oh, actually, I didn't hit him well with my sword. I was trying to hit him with my sword, but my momentum carried me forward, so I hit him with the dagger. Right there.
No,
it was a full commitment thrust.
So
1 point black. 1 point black.
it looks like Jesse's thrust missed. Adam really likes doing that kind of prison shank. I'm gonna run at you and stab you with my dagger, which is martially effective.
Well, the thing is, when you're fighting against his style, it's like you can't forget about the secondary weapon.
Because Adam will find a way to get past.
Judges.
Find a way to get past your point, and then once he can do that, then he can
1 point goal.
use his offhand dagger to stab you.
I mean, it's not just there for an engagement or deflection weapon.
You would ordinarily use it to set off or control your opponent's rapier, but it works perfectly well as a stabbing weapon.
But also, like,
Jesse's ready now
as
for me to charge it. Started realizing that as I charge in, he would try to cut, try to get close with the dagger. So that's what he was able to do here. I'm not sure if it was clean or not. Go ahead.
To the head. 1 point.
Cut to the head. Looks like Jesse might have got a thrust into the body at that point that the judges didn't see. But again, rapier happens so quickly that it is often hard to judge.
So I think I got that dagger, and he had his dagger like on the side like this. So just saying.
Angle here.
At this point, I realized that he's more ready for the dagger thrust and follow-up, so I started to be a little more conservative because we're running out of time. I'm behind on points. I want a good thrust, and they're only giving me 1 point for dagger thrusts, which I don't understand. Maybe it was just the rule set, but one dagger versus rapier, I mean, they're the same width, man. It's gonna hurt just as much or more.
Last
So
exchange.
Jesse's taking a back stance like this, and I'm kind of waiting for him to try to do a pass because I know it's a longer tempo. It's very powerful, but if I can get him to extend, that's kind of what I'm waiting for here. And I know it's the last exchange, so I'm like, all right, I'm gonna take my time. Okay, go ahead.
Jesse is in a high prima guard. Each fighter being very careful right now.
Judges, point black, target area.
There's the thrust.
And there's the thrust.
Match black.
Rewind just a little to that last little slow-mo. So as you can see there, that's what I was waiting for. I wanted him to overcommit. And as soon as he comes in, my dagger's there, and I thrust over and preem. Actually bent my sword a little bit. It ended up being a bit hard. So that felt like a good conclusion to that particular match. Jesse is a very athletic, very skilled fighter, and we've had some really good matches over the years.
Very cool. Thank you. So do we want to cover anything else in the presentation, or great stuff so far?
Any other questions or anybody on the?
Nothing's coming in question-wise. We get a lot of viewers though, so you kicked this off in the right way. So thank you for that.
Do you have any questions or anything on their behalf, maybe?
So first tournament for fighters, everybody comes in with a little bit of jitters, right? What was your first tournament experience like maybe at CombatCon? What's your first CombatCon tournament experience?
I'm going to go back a few more years to one of the ISMAC tournaments, which again, to me is kind of like pre-CombatCon. It still kind of counts in that it was a lot of the same people. I was in a rapier tournament, and I had not had a lot of years of rapier yet. I was pretty new, and I was jittery, man. My blade was like all over the place. Somehow I fought through, and I was able to get third. But it was a pretty beginner tournament. It was a lot of mixed skill levels there. And looking back, I think I was using the dagger and sword versus people single sword, which I like to match now. If they have a sword and dagger, I want a sword and dagger. But I actually prefer single rapier for tournaments. Why? Because even though I quite like the sword and dagger, it's harder to be safe because there's two weapons. And in single rapier, I feel like because of my Capoferro and Gigante Fabris kind of style, I'm able to gain their sword enough. And when I can feel a good bind, or if they try to thrust me unprotected, I can often do a counter. And I feel like I can more control the fight. Where in sword and dagger, you end up sometimes, if the person's cagey, you have to almost shoot for openings. Or try to get like I did in this fight. I want a dagger thrust and single time attack if I can. That's what you want, right? Because if you parried with your dagger, your sword should be striking in the same tempo or in as near as possible. The adage is in one of the manuals, as the sword goes to parry, the sword departs. As the dagger goes to parry, the sword departs to strike. So it should be almost the same time. It doesn't have to be exactly, but you get the idea.
Cool. Yeah, and we do have one last question. It's a good question to wrap up with is, what's your post-tournament recovery regime?
I think some well-earned beverages with people. I like to go out to some of the social events if I can, and just take it easy for a few weeks, man. I mean, especially if I felt like maybe I didn't go into that tournament as in good a shape as I wanted to be, and I pulled something or I was a little sore. Take it a little easy for a while. Like I said, my shoulder sometimes acts up after a tournament, especially. I don't spar for a few weeks, man. I just help teach and take care of things.
Awesome. And one last question. Any suggestions for recentering yourself in a tournament?
Yeah, I think some people like to have a ringside person. I find it just a little bit distracting. I want to, I try not to pay too much attention to the judging. If I get a bad call, I try to just wash it off and think about, I keep moving. I'm thinking about, okay, how about this? What's my next tactic? What's my next choice? What can I observe about this opponent? Are they aggressive? Are they defensive? Are they fast? Are they slower than me? These are all factors. And yes, I've fought faster, more athletic people such as Jesse. That's not always the determining factor, right? Sometimes it's tactics, and sometimes by being patient, I can do better. Other times, I've got to be a little bit more aggressive, and I've got to figure out, okay, I'm behind. It's time to go all in, man. Let's do something big. So make it happen.
Cool. Adam, thank you very, very much for joining us tonight. You were our first presentation and you really kicked it off well. So thank you. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Tom.
Take a look through, getting recommendations for after fight beverages here coming through. So take a look through the chat. I think a few folks said they'll have some questions for us after the fact as well. But again, thank you so much for coming on, and hopefully we can cross blades someday. I appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. Look
Very
forward
cool.
to it. And
Thank you.
people should reach out to me on Facebook if they got questions. Thank you.
Very cool. Thanks. Good. All right. Let's make sure things go a little well here. Sorry, trying to just get us all organized. Cool. All right. So it was a great way to start. And thank you again, Adam, for doing this for us. As a matter of fact, when we were talking about this a month ago or so, longer than that, one of the first, ideas that came up was doing a kind of a chronological of a fighter and a history of a fighter, the path of a fighter at CombatCon. And this was great, and Adam did an awesome job. So hopefully you all enjoyed that as much as I did. So thank you again. What we're going to do now, let's move into an interview from actually CombatCon 2016 with Maestro Ramon Martinez and Maestro Jeanette Acosta Martinez. They kind of hold a very special place in my heart. They introduced me to classical fencing when I joined the Martinez Academy and started my fencing path back in 1999, I think it was. This is a great video. It's a short clip, but it's a great clip that talks about the different perspective or a perspective on the different disciplines offered at CombatCon and how they all truly are related together. And that's kind of what we're representing this week. We wanted to pull together everything from the writer's track to the stunt and choreography and film track to the HEMA track to the instructional track and the martial pieces, and kind of give everybody a flavor for what CombatCon can offer and how amazing it really is. And again, all leading up to this weekend. So let me tee up this video for us. It is a video only, so give me a second to get that running and we can start things up. So as always, if you have any questions, please pop them in the chat. I am trying to monitor that as we go through. If I miss something, just ping it back in, or I'll obviously be checking the chat afterwards as well. So with that, I think I've got us rolling here. Let me go to that, set that up, and I'll put myself on mute and enjoy this clip. Thanks, folks.
And I'm from New York. I'm Maestro Ramon Martinez. I'm a master of arms, and I'm from New York City.
I'm Maestro Jeanette Acosta Martinez. I'm a master of arms, and I'm also from New York City.
I'm teaching cane self-defense and fencing concepts and theory applied to various weapons. I'm also teaching
Dueling sword?
Oh yeah, French dueling sword. Any real martial artist knows that his true adversary is himself. Is to better yourself as a better person. Not only do you get the physical benefits, but you get the internal benefits as well if you study and train correctly.
Yeah, I think for me the most important thing is that you're committed to doing something and that you stick with it. That you train, you try to improve, and you try to improve yourself on all levels. So whether it's getting fit, whether it's excelling at that particular art, whichever weapons form you've chosen, or whether it's evolving into finding some other weapon that maybe suits you better. But going through that journey, I think, is the most important part. I would say it's a good opportunity to be introduced in various levels to different aspects of it. So the idea that there is people that are in the film industry and stage industry, that in itself is interesting, because sometimes as martial artists we sort of look down on that when we don't really understand the reality of what they have to deal with, which is very different from what we do, because they're given actors that may not necessarily be trained and they have to deal with that. So that was interesting for us, learning sort of that area of it. At least for me, that's been interesting, how they create the illusion. So I think that's an interesting aspect of maybe someone's interest in that respect. Otherwise, if they're really interested in the martial aspect of it, I think it's a good way to be introduced into such a variety of teachers, but also a variety of weapons forms and possibly things they've never even considered or may not even know exist.
I look at this, I don't fight. I'm a fencer. I'm a swordsman. Can, but I won't. The biggest fight I always say is against myself. I fight it's like Jekyll and Hyde. I fight Mr. Hyde every day. And that's for my own personal gain, yes. But I think it benefits other people as well, too, because you really can't really understand yourself unless you put yourself in a pressure situation to see how you're going to react. Will you react in the correct way? Will you react in a vulgar way? Will you react in a barbarous way? And you won't know until you're there. So this is one of the most important things about CombatCon. To get back with what we were saying before, why I would urge someone to come. My mom used to say, you don't know what the soup tastes like until you put your spoon and taste it. So you come here, taste it, see what it's like. Either you like it or you won't. It's up to you.
Yeah. We think of ourselves as fencers. We don't consider ourselves fighters because for us, they have two different meanings. So a fencer is someone that is trained in the art and science of defense. A fighter can be anyone. And for example, someone that does combatives, I would consider a fighter, absolutely. But I don't consider myself a fighter because for me, it's all about the defense. It's about learning this art. It's about being able to teach this art to other people, and it's an art that you can't actually use on the street because no one wears swords anymore. So that's why we don't like that term. I understand that people use that term, but it's just not something that resonates with us.
Violence, yes. It's part of human nature. It's part of human history. Violence has always been around since Cain picked up that stick and killed Abel, so there's nothing new. I think it's important to know that because it's part of telling a story. Playwrights, novelists, movie directors and stuff like that, they need that to tell that, because violence for just violence sake within a narrative is useless. It doesn't mean anything. It has to be part of the story.
I like the use of swords in a narrative because it adds another level of interest in for me, but also because with the sword there is so many other possibilities. So for example, in a general fight, in an armed fight, there's always you're trying to knock the other person out, or you're trying to get away of some sort. But with the sword, you have so many other possible levels. You have the capacity to put in the context of some kind of street violence where these random people are all of a sudden they're pulling out swords and they're fighting for whatever reason. But you also have the possibility of putting into the context of a duel. And you also have the possibility of putting it into context of an ambush, all kinds of things. So I think it's a very interesting weapon to use in a narrative.
If there's one thing that I think that people should learn from, involved in all these combatives and martial arts and stage combat and that sort of thing, I said, and this is the important thing, you don't ever want to do this for real. You should be able to, but you should never desire that. Never glamorize violence. Never.
Yeah, I think for me the important thing, like I said before, I think people should do this for the journey, for what you learn about yourself throughout this, because I think I agree with my husband that I see this recent sort of trend towards glorifying the violence of it, rather than understanding that you're in it to practice and to improve yourself first, because you can't control someone else in that kind of situation if you can't even control yourself.
So I hope you guys enjoyed that. Still working through the kinks here, and let me stop that video before it makes any more noise in the background. if you ever have a chance to take a class from either of them, I cannot encourage it enough. And I know many folks here will say that same exact thing. One, it'll be some incredible techniques and insight, and you will walk out of there a better fighter and a better martial artist and a better fencer. I want to use the same terminology they used. But in part, it's the stories that you will hear as well are just amazing, right? So again, and if you're ever in New York, I'm sure you're more than welcome to check that out. Martinez Academy is an amazing place. And I keep using that word, sorry. But it, again, holds a pretty special place for me in my heart. All right, so one of the goals here is to introduce all the different tracks that we have. And again, let me just put a plug in. If you have a chance and you're interested in what you're hearing here and you want to hear more about it, this weekend is virtual CombatCon. It's a full weekend of events with kickoff starting on Friday night as part of the preview week. And then the paid events and training sessions happening over the weekend. Go to the CombatCon.com website, check out the schedule that we have there, and register and sign up. It's going to be a great weekend. All right, with that, let's introduce our writer wrangler in TL Smith. TL is joined by Ginny Coach. I'll put their full bios up on the link. TL can be found at tlsmithbooks.com. And Ginny can be found at ginnycoach.com. And again, it's GINIKOCH.com. And they're going to talk to us today in a pre-recorded video they just shot last night for us. And they're going to talk to us about violence in writing your character and storycraft and putting the violence into your character there. So let me tee this one up. And again, enjoy, sit back. Please, if you have any questions that come in, pop it into the chat and I'll keep monitoring it and follow up accordingly. So let me get this open for us while we're talking. And get us rolling here. I only have one set of hands, unfortunately, but trying to make the most of it. So here we go. Enjoy, and I'll be back in a little bit.
Hi, I'm Terry Smith with Virtual CombatCon 2020. I'm the writer wrangler, and today I lassoed Jenny Koch with the Alien Kitty Cat series. And we're going to be talking about violence in our characters. Hello, Ginny.
Hey, Terry. Thanks for having me. And thank you for letting me showcase the Alien Catherine Kitty Cat series for CombatCon. I'm excited to get to do so.
Well, the first question is stemmed from a conversation we had a while back when one of my characters became so violent in his scene that you felt that he was becoming dislikable. How do we know when that happens?
Well, that's a great question. And some of it actually requires somebody else to talk to. But we don't all have that luxury. So one of the things you want to look for is how angry is your character, and does anybody understand their justification for that anger? And then once you have that explained out, and I'm not saying a tremendous amount of, say, info dumping, but you need to know what's motivating your character, okay? What all their past traumas are, why they're angry, what makes them enraged. And then you have to look at it as if they're being enraged at your reader. And if it would make your reader go, yee, and not want to read it anymore, you're probably a little too violent. Now, your genre also matters too. And if you're in horror or something very dark, readers are much more open to a creepy character. If you're in what I would call light, medium light, science fiction, fantasy, romance, anything else, most people are not going to want to follow a character who's raging like the Hulk. And using the Hulk as an example, we have Banner character who's this nice, mild-mannered person. So we have the contrast, and we know what happened to him to make him reach out like the Hulk. So when it happens, happens, we see him fighting against it. We see him trying really hard not to Hulk out. And then when he does Hulk out, we understand why. So there's a lot of subtle things going on. They don't have to explain the Hulk every time you open up the magazine or a movie is turned on. It's just a couple of lines. And when you see Banner, the Banner character, he is a calm, mild-mannered person. So you don't want to have, I think, the Hulk in the whole thing. There's not the same interest level for the majority of readers if your character is basically a one-note rage machine. So you really want to be looking at ways to humanize that character, whether they're human or alien. Remember, your readers are all humans. They aren't animals, and they're not aliens. They're humans. So they still have to have something relatable, either a relatable thing or an opposite of what would be relatable that they can understand. So no one wants to be around a rage machine 24/7.
That's true. And at the time that we had the conversation, there was two views. Of course, between yourself and then the agent. And of course, during that little dinner meeting, I just sat back and listened to both of you, which was quite entertaining, because she's like, yes, he needs to be that violent. He's angry.
And my point was, no one's going to like him. And if they don't like him, they don't care about him. And if they don't care about him, they're done reading. I think it's a lot better to have something that would trigger the character into his rage, and otherwise he's controlled, just like the Hulk. And I'm going to go back to the Hulk all the time, because he's like the supreme example of this issue of how much rage is okay, how much violence is okay. If you think about it in the Marvel Universe, not the movies, we don't really see this happen much other than in the first Avengers movie. But for much of the Marvel Universe in comics, there's whole episodes dedicated to whichever hero trying to stop the Hulk, because he's gone all Hulk the whole time. And the only reason that's interesting is because you're following to see if Wolverine or Daredevil or whoever can stop him. Can Captain America stop the Hulk? Because otherwise, it's just some guy raging through on a rampage. And you don't want that. It's too one note. It's too one note for an entire comic, let alone an entire novel.
And I think they do very well at having that controlling character that's able to bring him back. And it's been in different of their movies. I mean, we're most often going to look and see the Black Widow.
Yeah.
But multiple times, I think Thor at one time tried to stop and got banged around a bit, but brought him back over.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that in the piece that you read, I have that controlling character that is able to reel my character back in when he starts going a little too far.
Yes, I like that. And I think it also helps to have that character, like you said, in your book, Estelle. In a lot of what I read, most of my characters are not out of control. They get angry. And in the case of Kitty, my heroine in the Alien series, rage gives her power. Not like she hulks out, but it gives her a lot of control over special added on gifts that she didn't have at the start of the series. It gives her a tremendous amount of control. She isn't just afraid, she's angry. And her reaction to most situations of the fight, freeze, or flight is always fight. She almost never freezes unless it's a snake. But beyond that, she doesn't. So she doesn't run. She runs if that's the only way to keep people safe. But if she's running, she's usually running towards the danger. And she's usually running towards the danger because she's angry. And she is angry at something hurting people she cares about, hurting innocents, wrecking things they shouldn't be wrecking. So most of my characters are controlled in no small part because I don't want to have to deal with someone who's got a hair trigger and where half of your effort as an author is to keep them under control. In your book, it makes sense based on the world, the universe you've created. For most of what I write, it doesn't. I want them able to fight using weapons, using, martial arts, but not necessarily just going off and going wacko. I really think it really matters. Your character has to have motivation that's understandable. Your character does. He's had a lot of horrible things happen to him. Once you know that, it's very understandable why he's in pain. But you don't know that in the first few chapters. So things have to be explained, really come through. And you always want somebody that the reader can hook onto. We go back to the Lethal Weapon. Okay, Riggs is nuts. And if Riggs was not played by somebody good looking, Riggs would not be considered any form of a hero. He's played by Mel Gibson, who will ignore any social issues, but Mel Gibson is a good-looking man, especially in the years he was doing that. Danny Glover's character, Murdoch, is the normal person you can hold on to. You can't be Riggs. You could be Murdoch.
Yeah.
But the whole thing is, again, the only reason we like Riggs is because he's hot. He's right, okay? He's right, all the stuff, but that is a loose cannon that could be terrifying, but it's handled well, and in no small part because you've got that character to hold on to, which is Murtaugh and his family.
Right. He's the controlling feature. It's like, back down.
Yeah.
We have, your partner and my family. Mm-hmm. We're all one. Yeah. And that works out well, which is pretty much where kind of the theme of mine is gets Lethal Weapon in space.
Yes. Yes.
Now, you did mention martial arts.
Yes.
Now, your husband and I both have a commonality in that we like to watch the Chinese videos with all the martial arts and everything.
All the Hong Kong movies, all the Chinese movies, yes.
I like to watch the fight scenes, but
yes.
I'll tell you, I'm finding that there's a very strong romantic level on there, but their fight scenes, every single one of them, I swear to God, they spit blood. I mean, not everyone dies vomiting blood.
Not everybody gets to work with wires either, so
because nobody can fly that far,
right? And do all those
off the back of their best buddy,
right? But that's part of the fun of those kinds of movies and everything else, and it depends on what you're writing. You're not necessarily looking for reality in some of those movies. Part of them are the mythical aspects of them, plus you want to see all the cool kung fu. I mean, Charlie's Angels used that, the rebooted movie with Drew Barrymore. I haven't seen the one with the newer one that bombed. Sorry, guys. But the Charlie's Angels, the Drew Barrymore Charlie's Angels, they're absolutely using wires, but they look great doing it. And you could say maybe they're just that good. And that's part of the fun of that. You want to be able to believe that. But in writing, it's different. You block it out differently. You have to describe it differently. On a video or a visual medium, you don't have to describe how it's done. The audience will see how it's done. You're trying to make the smoke and mirrors work. In a novel, your smoke and mirrors doesn't work that way. Depending on your point of view and how you're telling it, you can't just say, and then he kicked his ass. That doesn't tell us anything. We have to see that in a certain way, and how much you want to show, how violent you want to be, really depends on the story you're telling. And some stories get more violent than others because they need to be. And some stories, he punched him in the face and the guy flew back and landed against the wall is plenty. In others, you're going to want to talk about the blood dripping down his nose. It just depends on your genre, on your voice and how you do this, and a variety of other intangibles that come in terms of your genre, in terms of your subgenre, and in terms of the kind of writer you want to be. What do you want to be known for? And some authors are known for, their really graphic fight scenes and things like that. Is that what you want to do? If you do, great. What you need to do then is learn very much how to write a choreographed fight scene so that it's clearly understood. I also write fantasy, and one of the things I do when I'm doing big fight scenes there, that's usually a lot of characters and there's a lot of action. So I draw out the diagrams and I name everybody who is where, what is going on, and then I can describe their individual little battles and the battle as a whole because I have a reference to look back to. I don't do that for everything, but I do it when it's a bigger fight scene and when I have a lot of people that I have to keep track of. I did that for Alien in the Family. That's book 3 in my main series. And it has a gigantic fight scene near the end. And I have so many characters involved with that I had to block that out, which was good because I'd forgotten about one. So I was able to bring that character back in because I'd forgotten he was there. And that way you don't go the last third of the book going, what happened to that guy? He's just standing there by himself.
He was over there fighting and he disappeared.
Yeah. So all of these, they're all tricks and techniques.
Now, in the choreography of your fight scenes, now, one thing I have found about CombatCon as a convention is we have mixed the actual fighting with stunts professionals, amateurs, writers, and we're coming in, and as a writer, I went in and watched a session on hand-to-hand combat because I needed to see the movement. And then I was able to go in and use what I learned in that session with my characters.
Yeah.
Now, do you have similar resources that you use?
Well, my family all trained in Kung Fu. So I'm not a black belt by any means, but I have the background, therefore. So I know how techniques worked. So there's that background for me for hand-to-hand. And I've mentioned choreograph. Choreography is not just for dance. Every fight scene you watch in a movie is choreographed, usually by the stunt team. And they are the ones who make the choices on how it's going to look and what you're going to do. I will act out if I think it's really intense or I think I'm not sure how that would work. But because I have a Kung Fu background, I'm able to say, I know how this technique works because I did it. I did it live. I did it in class. I've used some of them on the street when I had to. And so, which makes you sound totally bad, doesn't it? Yeah. Ooh,
it does. I have used it too.
Yes. So, but yeah. So I pay attention. You can always tell when someone doesn't know what they're doing and hasn't done any research on it. We were watching a movie that will remain unnamed, and the big fight technique had everybody with their hands up like this, and my whole family were watching this, and my daughter nudges me and says, well, that's the stupidest choice. Yes, that's the stupidest choice ever. Well, my husband's nudging me on this time. What the heck is going on up there?
That's the same thing with the gun. You don't hold it in the manner that it kicks back and
on your face. So, and I also know how to shoot, and I own firearms. So yeah, it's the same kind of thing. So when I'm talking about recoil, I've always done. I know what it feels like. So is it necessary for you to do that? Have this life experience to write these scenes? No. But what is necessary is to do some research regarding it so that you at least sound sane. I mean, there's a very logical reason. The only reason the boxers are like this note how their fists are. That's so they can go like that. Okay, and you can move their hands.
And that's very much a martial arts as well.
But you put your hands up like this, and like Terry said, all somebody has to do is go bam, and you've knocked yourself out. So things like that, when you're thinking about it, just try it on yourself. If you wanted to put your fists up here, because this is such a great move, just think about how easy it would be for someone to hit your hand and knock you out. And if it's simple, you don't want to do it. So I know our time is short. All I is to get the opportunity to watch stuntmen doing the scenes, particularly when they're doing scenes someone's written. It's totally worth it. I'm always jealous every year when Terry comes back about it. It just sounds like the best thing in the world. So that's part of the con this year. Absolutely. And if not, when CombatCon comes back live, it is the best thing.
It is the acted out session where you're able to take the scripts from the author and give them to professional stunt actors. Sorry, that's a problem with recording things or doing them live. Our professional stunt personnel, whether there's women or men, will act out the scene exactly the way it's written. Mm-hmm. And you get to see what doesn't work. Yeah. Then they'll go back and pick it apart and help you with the right moves. Yeah. And then at the end, act it out in the rewritten form. Yeah. And this is such a resource for writers, mm-hmm. whether they're professional writers or they're beginning writers, yeah. because I've gotten equal reactions from both. Yeah. My professional writers who have won the contest and got their part acted out, got their part picked, nitpicked, yeah. down to the slightest detail of that won't work. Right. And, you know, sometimes we get through it and it's another writer that finds the error. Yeah. Like, you stab them in there, they're not going to die. And choreographer's like, oh my God, yeah, let's move it. Yeah. And it works out. So for all our writers who are wishing they could be at CombatCon 2020, this is our substitute for the panel of violence in our characters. There is a necessity, but learn to know you've gone so far as to make your hero the villain. Yes. And how to bring them back if you have. Yeah. Example, Darth Vader. Anyhow, thank you for joining us today.
It's great being here. Thanks, everybody.
Even though you're hostage in my house for another month.
Quarantine.
Anyway, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And see everybody in 2021.
Digits crossed.
Thank you.
That was awesome. And let me go back here and turn myself back on. Hopefully y'all can hear me. Thank you to Terry and Joni for coming on and doing that. They did it literally last night. We were talking about it last night. So I think it came out great. If you guys have any questions, I did post their sites in the chat. So please refer back to that. I can certainly relate to the Hulk and David Banner. Most of my friends just say I'm always angry, and that's usually the case. But anyway, thank you all for watching and staying with us. We got a really special segment coming up next, and you can see I'm going to put us in gallery view mode here. You can see the special guests that we have joining us now. You know, so without putting too much pressure out there, this should be fun, right? Each night this week, we're going to be talking with the CombatCon leadership team. I'm sure they'll all say this is a collective effort, but honestly, their leadership truly makes this all a reality, right? As I'm learning quickly, there is so much that happens behind the scenes that they all just, you know, kind of handle with grace and elegance and keep this thing rolling. I don't know how often they've been described as grace and elegant, but, you know, hey, I'll say it here.
Once now.
There's a first time for everything. I'm good. So tonight, we kick off with Jared Kirby, president of CombatCon, Tim Ruzicki, vice president and director of programming. Thank you both for one, allowing me to be a part of this incredible event, but more importantly, for the two of you taking your time to come on and chat with us for a bit.
Of course. I'm
cool.
Glad it worked out.
Good. Me too. So we've had a really good night so far. Actually, very few technical difficulties as I jinx us here, unfortunately, right? Knock wood on the table in front of us. Wore my Combat Cut shirt from last year. Had to represent a little bit here. So I see we're all there. So awesome.
Yeah, I decided this week I'm going to go through a CombatCon shirt.
Nice.
On. So
nice.
Got my staff 2019.
Very cool.
Nice. Hey, Jared, you have to do this because you're freezing every once in a while. Yeah, there we go. There we go. That's Jared's sign for when he freezes.
Oh,
nice.
Makes me so angry.
We're going to spend some time together on here, folks, 10, 15 minutes. And then, as I mentioned at the top of the call, we're going to close the night and stay together for Tim giving an intro to knife fighting. But let's see how long this takes us. And we're here for the duration. So thanks, guys. Let's start off with a quick question. I didn't prep the folks with Jared or Tim with any questions. I kind of wanted to just come at this cold, so we'd be a little spontaneous here. But related to your roles, can you give a little taste into the size and scale of CombatCon and how it's grown over the years?
Go ahead, Jared. No.
Yeah, it's grown a lot more than I think we ever imagined. For some reason, I was looking back at our first one, and I think the first CombatCon, we might have been around 100, 125 people at CombatCon 2011. And CombatCon 2019, we had about 750 people, and that doesn't include the experience hall and everything that's open to the public. So we tracked maybe 300-400 people coming in just randomly. In fact, that's my favorite stories about CombatCon tend to be those random things. Like we have somebody who was riding the elevator with some CombatCon people who had their swords, and he just got out of the elevator and followed them, which I guess sounds kind of creepy now, but he just followed them because they had swords, right? So he wandered around the experience hall and everything, came over, bought a pass, and is now planning on taking his vacations around joining us every year. So it's grown quite a bit.
Yeah, there were a lot of empty spaces in the first CombatCon. And to walk through the experience hall now, walk in the classrooms, see the tournaments, it's a just night and day difference.
Cool. I know for me, this I said at the top of the call, this would have been my third experience in Vegas, and we're all bummed, right? And but it was just the last 2 years have been absolutely amazing. And I was supposed to go the year before that, and I had nothing. I had no gear. And Jared was like, "Just go. I got stuff for you. You can borrow whatever you need." And I still remember that fondly because it would have been just an amazing time. And I'm really bummed that I'm set with myself that I didn't make it out there for that.
Friend.
Pardon?
Next year in 2021.
Oh my God. Yeah. We're going to have such a crew coming out in 2021. Cannot wait for it. Right?
Awesome.
So you talked a little bit about Jared, but Tim, maybe what are some of your fond memories? What are some, we talked about maybe doing some war stories, but rather let's go to the positive side for a second. What are some of the things that really warmed your heart with that you've seen at CombatCon?
Yeah, I think it's what I call the CombatCon experience. And every year we have something that stands out in my mind as an example of what CombatCon is and what it's about. Everything from somebody meeting his hero that he didn't know was going to be at CombatCon to somebody who has credited CombatCon for giving her confidence that she never knew she had, right? Every year we have these things. We have people working in Hollywood now because of the connections that they made at CombatCon. So I would say that there's I don't have really any specific favorites that come to top of mind, because every year there's a moment or an experience that that really shines for me.
I agree with Tim. We constantly talk. He's down here for me, and we talk about this a lot because, like you said, it's nobody really understands how much goes on behind the scenes. So it's important to have that thing that drives you to do this, and those stories really are it. My favorite one, because he's one of my guys, is with Chris, who loves whip work. And so he always came out for Anthony DeLongis's seminars, and doing whip with Anthony, he just loved. And so he, one time he went to Anthony's seminar, and he looked over, and this guy is doing the double whip routine from Underworld, from the first Underworld fight. And Chris goes over, he's like, I know that choreo also. Like, that's actually what got him into whip, was that fight. And then he'll tell you, he just went out in his backyard with goggles on and got a lot of bruises, and he taught himself that routine. And he's like, oh, wow, it's amazing. You love that routine also. And Scott McElroy turned to him and said, I did the routine. That's me in the movie. So Chris has a video of him and Scott doing that choreo side by side.
Nice.
And that's a CombatCon moment. That's, you can't, all we can do is keep bringing and attracting awesome people to this event. And I think that that's the foundation of what brings those opportunities to light.
And that's, and I thank you guys for allowing us to do this preview week, right, and the free content, because one of the things that you both have said right from the start is you want to introduce CombatCon to people that might not have gone there at the beginning, right, might not be thinking about going to Vegas. And this is a great way to do that. And, so maybe give us a little, what advice would you have if someone's on the fence about coming out to Comic? I know what I would say: get your butt out there as quick as you can, right? But, what advice would you give someone who's kind of not had that in-person experience yet and is on the fence?
So I have some students who fall into that category, and I constantly try to say, hey, look, just come out, just it's fun. I think the problem with that a lot of people face is they're intimidated by it. They see this massive convention, and it's in Vegas, and it's the heart of Vegas on the Strip, right? And it's 1,000 people and all that nonsense, right? And they find it intimidating. The reality is that everybody there is approachable. From our most distinguished Hollywood folks to our best fighters in the tournaments, to our most accomplished instructors, right, and masters. Everyone is extremely approachable, extremely friendly, and very willing to share what they know. And that's what I would tell people is, like, look, come on out. It's just a big family. It's a big community. It's just a big group of folks that love this crazy world that we're in. So.
Yeah, my answer is pretty simple when I'm talking to somebody about it. I just tell them, come out. If you don't have an amazing time, you suck. I mean,
gentlemen.
Yeah, and here's why I say that. Like, you're in Las Vegas. Even if you hate CombatCon, stay at the cheap rooms at the Flamingo. Don't come back after day one, and go have an amazing time in the city, because there's so much going on. If you can't have a great time in Las Vegas, that's
We've had some instructors that did that, actually.
Yeah. I forgot about that. Yeah, we had a couple instructors come, and it was not what they expected. So after day one, they went off and had a good time, didn't come back. And again, that's what I mean, is that we're not trying to just attract people. We're not trying to have a huge event and all of that. What we're really concerned about is having awesome people come together every weekend or every year for this. And it's part of what energizes me about the event and gets me excited, is that the people that come back every year are quality people. Like, they're all people that I want to hang out with and talk to. And maybe I'm not interested in what drives them, as far as where their passions lead them, but because they're a passionate person about something, we're already connected. Maybe my geekery goes in a different road than theirs does, but we're at the heart of it, we're the same.
And I'll say to you too, that was very much one of my concerns. Was I was going there by myself at the first time, and I wasn't sure, who am I going to hang with? What am I going to do? And the next year I went with a few of us went, handful of us went together, and it was great. Everybody was so open. There was no one you couldn't walk up to. By the end of the weekend, you're having conversations with people that I never knew before and never thought I would just be talking to. The trick I'll say is, though, come back for the next year. Because every year we're experiencing, like, I'm more relaxed the following year and I'm having more fun and doing more things. So the more years you go, the more it becomes just part of your DNA at that point, at least my feeling, at least, right?
I also think that there's too much to do in one year, right? So if you're coming for the classes, there's way too much content. So, the first year you might just start taking everything you can, right? I want to do some whip, and I want to do tomahawk, and I want to learn knife, and I want to learn, pugilism and all that stuff, right? And you get burned out. You just can't do it all. And so you have to be able to come back year after year to take those other things that you haven't been able to experience before.
I remember one of my students, David, when he came the first time, I just happened to see him, which is weird because I can go a whole weekend and not run into anybody, and then I'll see the same person 8 times in a day. I happened to run into him after every class session, and after the first class, he was like, "Man, I just did," I don't even remember what. He's like, "It was the most amazing class ever." And then I saw him after his second class. He's like, "I just did, and it was the most amazing class ever." And then he's like, "I just threw knives with Jack Dagger. It was the most amazing class ever." And that's fun. That's a lot of people's experience with that programming.
Cool.
My favorite thing here is when somebody says, "There's just too much. I can't decide what to take." That's my favorite thing to hear, because it means we're doing our job well.
Yeah. We all joke, and especially if you're doing the tournament track as well as the classes, right? You have these grand aspirations of attending 1 million classes and doing all the tournaments, and it just doesn't happen, right? Because this time gets away from you. So where do you guys want to see CombatCon go in the future? Right? What do you see as the next, do we dare say 5 years, 10 years in the future? And what do you hope to see?
Yeah, more. As any bad theater director will tell you, just do this, but more. Yeah, it's funny because I'm a strong believer in the gravitational pull that things will have. So if we're invested in having good people do great work and that part of it, we have gone in directions we never could have imagined. TSL is a perfect example of that, where it was totally random. Terry reached out to us during the HEMA live stream finals. Just reached out to us on Facebook, and we started talking, and yeah, this sounds perfect for CombatCon. And it absolutely was, and has been and continues to be. The TSL folk are amazing. And then last year, bringing Adrian Paul into the mix. We couldn't have imagined doing that. We couldn't have planned that. but it was, again, this perfect symmetry of what he's doing and what we're doing with the event. It was just a wonderful addition. And so I expect in the next 5 years to continue that trend and have more things that I can't imagine would be a great fit for CombatCon come up, and we'll bring them into the fold. Because Tim described it this way years ago, and it's always stuck in my head that CombatCon's really a big tent, right? And we just fill that thing full of awesome people.
Speaking of things that were said years ago, when Jared first pitched this idea to me, he said that at some point in his life, he wants to have a conversation with somebody he's never met and say, oh yeah, I do martial arts, and have that person say, oh, Eastern or Western. And CombatCon ostensibly started as a Western martial arts convention, or a historical European martial arts convention. And it's grown beyond that to include a tremendous amount of fun activity and just really broad content. But at its heart, it's still that desire for me to see us reach more and more and more people with the message that martial arts is this massive universe. It includes Western and African and Eastern and just everything that we can imagine, right? It includes sci-fi martial arts. It includes stage and screen and stunt fighting. It's such a broad, like Jared said, it's a big tent. And that's where I'd like to see us eventually get to, where we're recognized more, sort of more universally as an event to go to, because we have the martial arts.
It's amazing. We're getting some good questions. And one of the recurring themes is, let's make it an extra day longer.
These are tears.
Stay there.
The funny thing about that, Tom, is that originally it was a 2-day event, and at some point it became a 3-day event, and we're not quite sure how. It just happened.
It was totally an accident. We have thought this through over and over again. We would have opening ceremonies on Friday night, and then somehow we programmed Friday.
Nice.
And all of a sudden we're like, wait, this is a 3-day event. How'd that happen? Because people started asking, oh, why isn't opening ceremonies on Thursday? We're like, because it's no, it's not.
Should be. And Monday, right? We have the Monday content as well, right? So technically it could even be considered a 4-day event, right?
Well, yeah, it's kind of our 4 days with Thursday. So Thursday's kind of now become a soft open while the HEMA tournaments begin. And then there may be a little bit of programming going on during that time before we get to opening ceremony. So
cool.
And then Tom's right. On Monday, we often have master classes. So there is content happening on Monday as well. So yeah.
Yeah. Just the tears that I had from that suggestion, just so people know, we the directors team arrive on Tuesday, and we spend all day Wednesday in about 12 hours of meetings to get everything set up and ready, and then some time to actually get that work done. So just Tuesday and Wednesday we're already there. Monday it's all wrap up. So
we just got the suggestion here to make it a summer camp.
We have thought about moving it to a cruise ship. Does that count?
Well, I got to be honest. I would talk with you guys all night, right? And we have done that a few times, right? So thank you both. But let's close with a cliffhanger. If I can ask, right? Each of you tease us with something that you would normally say, well, that's a story for another time. And you can just leave us with a cliffhanger of a story for another time. Thoughts?
Oh, lots of them, but not stories I want to tell later.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the ones that are appropriate to discuss on
I know.
Facebook.
Mine will be why Jared is not allowed to make decisions on Sunday.
A story for another time.
Oh,
Yep.
that's good. That's good.
See, that alone should be telling that there are so many that you're troubled with.
Yeah. It's more. I'm having trouble with the PG content.
You could tell him, Tim, why you don't take me to In-N-Out Burger anymore.
That's one. Yeah, that's one. I also I'll say mine would be why we fear that our that a couple months before our event every year that our hotel is going to get blown up.
Oh, yeah.
All right, another story for another time. Cool.
Yeah.
And being an East Coaster, right? I In-N-Out Burger is every night because we don't have anything out back east, right? So it's just love it.
Yeah,
So I want to hear that story at some point. Why?
Yeah, I'd like to eat there someday.
All right. Thank you both very much. This was amazing. I really appreciate it. And for those that are out there, we've got, discussions with the other officers and leadership team for the remainder of the week. And I know they'll be as endearing and charmful and amazing as this conversation was. So thank you both very, very much. I really appreciate it.
Of course.
And
thanks for and all this, Tom. It's a massive undertaking yourself. So thank you.
Cool. Thanks, guys. And Tim, hang out. And Jared, thank you so much again.
Okay.
Appreciate it. All right.
Bye. Have fun.
So we've got another half hour here. We're going to close out with Tim doing the knife. Let me do the official bio, if you don't mind. I'll go through it. So Tim joins us, one of the foremost experts in classical British pugilism, 18th and 19th century art of bare knuckle boxing. He's spent over 30 years studying historical and modern forms of martial arts and martial sports, including boxing, wrestling, competitive grappling, Western swordsmanship, walking, cane, World War II combatives, close quarters firearms, and various personal protection systems. The knife system that Tim has studied includes Spanish Navaja, American Bowie, Filipino Kali, French Poignard, military combative knife, and modern close quarters knife. And Tim currently teaches and resides in Seattle, Washington. So thank you for officially doing a class with us. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to shut up and turn the mic over to you.
All right. Well, thanks, Tom. I appreciate you allow me to do this. So this session is called Intro to Knife Fighting. And I wanted to talk briefly about what that really means. What is a knife fight? I think when we hear knife fighting, most people think about what I understand or what I call a knife duel. That is, two people squaring off with a knife and they're going to have a fight in a back alley. In modern society, that's extremely rare, very, very rare. So a knife fight to me is what has been described to me by one of my instructors as any fight includes knife, which really means any fight anywhere, because you can have a knife in your pocket, you can have a knife in the kitchen, you can have a knife in your car, anywhere. So any fight that you engage in automatically becomes a fight. But for the context of this session, I want to phrase it and couch it as a knife, because that's a lot more fun than getting into close quarters on a personal protection work. So it's clear, right? This is for educational purposes only. It is intent. Yeah. By the way,
Pause you for 1 second. We were having some connection issues. It wasn't out by any means, but it was a little spotty. So I just wanted to pause us and catch us up for some reason. Maybe there was just an overload for somewhere. So sounds like we're okay right now. So turn it back over to you. Sorry for the interruption.
No worries. No worries. Interrupt away. We're just getting to the disclaimer. This is for educational and training purposes only, or like a tournament, like a competitive sports tournament, or for personal protection. If you use this in any other context, you are a bad person and you shouldn't do that. Okay, so that's my disclaimer from from that perspective. I'm going to move this because you'll want to probably see me and get that out of the way. All right, great. So we're going to start off with talk about what we're going to cover today. So I will show you some grips I will show you posture. I will show you a basic cut and thrust pattern. All right, let's talk about grips. Here we have a Navaja trainer. There we go. All right, and so let's talk about grips. The first grip we'll cover today is called the hammer grip, and that is if I hold the knife like this. This is my power grip. This is meant to deliver powerful thrusts and cuts into my opponent, into my target, right? It's intended to rip through heavy jackets, through bone, through muscle, right? It's a power grip. It's called the hammer grip. The second grip is the saber grip, and that's with my thumb on the back of the blade here. This is a finesse grip. The idea behind this is that I am guiding the blade with my thumb. I can put a little extra power into it, but not as much as this hammer grip. This hammer grip is just meant to just nail into my target, right? So this is a finesse grip. Again, it's called the saber grip. The third grip we'll talk about is the foil grip, and that is where I turn the blade this way. So if I stand up here, I turn the blade flat, and I put my thumb here. This is the foil grip. This is a really good grip for getting into tight areas like ribs, underneath the ribs, wrenching up, etc. Right? So the foil grip. And then the final grip we'll talk about is the Mediterranean grip. This grip was taught to me by Maestro James Loriega of Acerio Sevillano. That's Spanish, and I'm butchering it, so I apologize. But the Mediterranean grip is held this way. Blade forward, edge back, right? So again, if I stand up here, this way, okay? All right. So now we have those four grips. We're going to use them interchangeably in this session. Let's talk about posture. Feet placement. One foot should be in front of the other, and I don't care which. Doesn't matter. Because we're bipeds, we're going to move both feet. So you should get comfortable with one leg being in front of the other as though you were walking. Okay. The next piece about the posture is what to do with the hands, where to put the hands. There are a lot of different types of stances or guards, but for our purposes today, we're just going to take a very neutral guard or neutral posture. That is, with the knife held here at my waist, my other hand up here by my head. This is to protect myself, my neck, my face, and my vital organs here. So I can take a slash on my arm, but I won't take a slash into my body or into my neck, right? If I switch my feet and I put the knife ever so slightly forward, it's here rather than here, I'm gonna simply use my hand over here to protect this side of my neck, okay? Very simple. One foot, in this case, it's my left foot, now my right foot. Okay. Simple posture. One thing I should mention, the knees are bent. The knees are the shock absorbers for our body and for our movement. And so we want to be able to move quickly and spring into action, but have a little bit of shock absorption there. Okay. All right. Now we have the posture. Let's talk about the cuts and thrusts. There are two ways to do a cut. The first is what I call a drawing cut. You're cutting through the target, drawing through that target. You're leading with this part of your hand and drawing through that target. The second is a snipe or a snap cut here, where you're basically flicking that blade into the target. The drawing cut will cause a lot more damage. but the sniping cut is fast, it's very effective, and you can make somebody drop a knife, for example, or a stick or whatever else other tool they might have. Right? So 2 ways to cut. Likewise, there are 2 ways to thrust. The first is a penetrating thrust, where we're driving through our target deep into the tissue. That's a penetrating thrust. The second is a punch. Bam, 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 right? It's a quick, sharp thrust. Penetrating thrust causes more damage. It goes deeper into the target. But the punch, or punching thrust, is just a quick, sharp, very effective, violent thrust. Okay. So those are 2 ways to do the thrusts. All right, now we have the posture, we have the grips, we have the 2 ways to do a cut and 2 ways to do a thrust. Let's talk about a very simple cut and thrust pattern. This is a 9-count cut and thrust pattern, 5 cuts, 4 thrusts. All right, from our posture here, we're going to cut 1. For those of you who are the German longsword, this is the blow of wrath, right? 1. Comes from the shoulder and the body. The thing I should stop and mention here is the concept of the window of combat. The window of combat is a box from the middle to the head to about here. So imagine a window around my body. I'm keeping my arms and my knife inside that window of combat. If I cut down here, my face is here. This is what's going to get stabbed, and this thing does no good. If I cut up here, my blade is all the way there. It's no good. So I keep everything inside the window. Cut 1. I'm going to reverse the knife, bring it up my shoulder, cut 2. I'm just going to do it with my hands, right? 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. This is still X. Okay. Now let's complete this pattern. Tom, did you have? Yeah. Fire away.
Yeah. So again, I just want to make sure we catch up. For some reason, we're getting a little choppy on the video again. Everything came through still, but I just wanted to give us a pause for a second to have everything.
No worries.
Catch up. So it sounds like we're good to go again. So off to you. Sorry about that.
Cool. All good. All right. So we have 1 and 2. Let's complete that. We're rolling the blade up and cutting up for 3, dropping, cutting up for 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. 1 and 2 are downward cuts. 3 and 4 are upward cuts. Let's take a moment to talk about targets. Where might I use this cut? Anywhere. It's about the angle of the cut. So this, by the way, could be an upward cut. It could be a horizontal cut. Upward cut, horizontal cut. It's the angle and the hand position. Right? Here versus here. This is supinated. This is pronated. Pronated. Supinated. Pronated. Pronated on the other side. Right? So it's really all about how you hold the knife, and it's about the angle of the cut. Very little else. All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, without moving my feet. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's add the thrusts. When I cut up on 4, my blade is pointing at the target. If I move my blade out here, it's not doing anybody any good, especially me. Right? So I leave my blade inside the window of combat, pointing at my target. Here, notice the origin of my arm. It's straight. I'm not thrusting this way because this is a bent wrist, which is a weak wrist. I'm thrusting down into the target because this is strong. All right, so I've just cut 4 and I thrust now down into the target. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, down in the target. I pull that out of my target. I drop this over, rolling my hand, and 6. Why am I doing this with my other hand? Why am I dropping this down here? This is a guarding position. I'm imagining a thrust is coming here at my body. I'm stepping off line, covering that line, and thrusting at the same time. All right, so 5, 6, 5, 6. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, pulling this knife back out. Now, thrusting straight down the line for 7. This is a lunging thrust. Okay, so we have 6, 7. From here, I'm pulling my blade back out, moving my hand into a hammer grip, and thrusting up into the body. This might be into the ribs, it might be into the groin, it might be into the head. Right? I'm thrusting up into the body. From there, I'm leaving the blade in the body, rolling it into the Mediterranean grip, and ripping out for 9. That cut is a ripping, pulling cut. I can use that in any number of situations. I've just blocked an incoming blow, and I rip back out on the outside of that arm. Okay? That's one application. All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. And with that simple 9-count cut thrust pattern, that concludes my segment. Tom, do we have any questions?
We don't. A lot of viewers, which is good, but no open questions at this point.
Then let me add one additional thing, just because everybody's super advanced now, right? The checking hand. All right, so cut 1, check. Cut 2, check. The idea being that knife dueling is a dynamic situation. So I'm fighting somebody, I cut, they avoid, they thrust back, and I check. Right, so 1, check. 2, check. 3, check. 4, check. 5, check. 6, check. 7, check. 8, check. 9, check. Right, using the other hand in combination with the blade is extremely important. I don't want to fight like this. This is a terrible way to fight, right? Because this can be used in conjunction with the knife, right? All right, and that is the cut thrust pattern with the checking hand.
Very cool. Quick question. So
yeah.
As far as range and measure to your opponent when you're fighting, right? Are you always getting into their space? Are you kind of keeping them at a distance? Where's the comfort feeling? Where's the right place to be, the sweet spot?
It's a great question. And it depends on who you're talking to. So I like letting them come to me because I know my measure. And if they come to me, I can very easily avoid and then return attack. But if they're timid, I like going to them, right? If I can push them back and force them back, then I can take advantage of their natural timidness. Timidity? Timid? I don't know. Whatever, right? So it's all a question of who you're fighting.
Cool. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. To the folks that are out there, if you have any questions, pop them into the chat. I'll be continuing to monitor it. If you happen to miss any part of anything tonight, but especially any part of what Tim did earlier, we're going to have this replayed and recorded, and it'll be available for you guys up on the Facebook page to look at after the fact, or view a million times to get these techniques in that form and pattern down. So you can show it off next time you're at CombatCon and talk to Tim.
There we go.
Cool.
That's right.
Any closing comments you want to make before we wrap up the segment?
Nope. I think that covers it.
Cool. Well, thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it. We're just going to close out here for a few seconds. Thank you, sir. Have a good night.
Thank you.
All right. All right. So let's close out for the night, right? We are, I want to say thank you to everybody that stayed here with us. I've been trying to monitor the chat, and we did get a question, Tim, and about a little more detail on the Mediterranean grip. Maybe we can cover that in a later session or do a quick follow-up offline.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, cool. You're still there. Very cool. Awesome.
Yeah. Do you want to do that now? I'm happy to do that now.
Yeah, if you want to, that'd be great. I think they would love that. So, yep. Thanks.
What's the question?
The question is, can you provide a bit more info on the history of the Mediterranean grip?
The best person to ask that question would be Maestro James Loriega of Acero Cerviano. James is my Navaja master and the world's premier expert in the Spanish Navaja. And I don't know much more than what he taught me. And that is simply that back in the day, before locks were really effective on a knife, a lock on a folding knife is extremely important, because if it doesn't have a lock, it just closes, right? So I guess you can't really see that. Oh, hey, look, there we go. Right, that's my training folding knife, right? So because the locking mechanism wasn't really effective, to use this appropriately, you would turn the blade over this way and pull with that, so that it's moving against the pivot mechanism here. That way, you're not running the risk of doing something like this and having the blade fall over and cut your hand, which is, embarrassing when you're trying to hurt the other person and you hurt yourself. Right? So that's why the Mediterranean grip held this way. But again, highly recommend talking to Master James Loriega. He is the guy to ask that query to.
Very cool. Thank you very, very much. Appreciate it. There are no other questions, so I'll let you go.
All right. Thank you, Tom.
So before we break, folks, let's just talk a little bit about tomorrow, right? If you haven't had a chance to go up to the CombatCon.com website, the link is in the description for this post. So make sure you go up there and check out not only the schedule we have for the remainder of the week, but also Saturday and Sunday. And that is also the place you can go to register for Saturday and Sunday's virtual CombatCon. Tomorrow, we're going to have Morgana Alba come by and give us some flexibility tips and training tips and techniques. We're going to hear an interview from Maestro Paul McDonald, not only as both a vendor at the show and displaying his wares, but also on the techniques and things he does. We're going to have a video from Richard Marsden comparing Italian and German longsword. Interview with Kristen Kahlberg, Rocket, from CombatCon leadership team. Sorry, it's been a long night and I haven't had enough to drink yet. Water or coffee. And we're going to go through a really great video from Dr. Sarah Lewis on the neuroscience of effective motor learning and teaching. And then we'll, keep talking about what's happening for the rest of the week. If anybody has any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Ping me or ping any of us. We'll certainly do our best to answer or point you in the right direction. I want to say a special thank you to everybody for tonight. Adam and Tim and Jared, of course, and Terry and Joni, I have a friend, never mind. For the Ginny, not Joni, my fault. Sorry, threw myself there for a second. For being with us tonight. And thank you everybody who's scheduled for later this week. I really appreciate the hard work that's go into all this. I'm just pulling it all together. So I thank you all for doing all the work to create the content, and for everybody, of course, for being on and watching. We've had a great audience tonight. Tell your friends, share the link. There are reminders going out, but we'll see you all back again tomorrow night, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. This will be saved to the CombatCon Facebook page, so you can watch it at your leisure throughout the days to come. And if you weren't with us today live, you can hopefully have seen this and have watched the recording of it. So send it out to your friends, and hope to see everyone again tomorrow, later this week, and of course this weekend at the virtual CombatCon event. I am Tom Amoroso, and thank you again to all of the presenters and content creators for this evening, and I will see you all again tomorrow night. Thanks, folks. Talk to you soon.